When Jesus said, "Ask, and you shall receive," he was not talking about begging an external God for favors. He was revealing the most profound spiritual law that Joel Goldsmith spent decades helping people understand. This teaching has been misinterpreted for centuries, causing millions to pray ineffectively and wonder why their prayers go unanswered. The secret lies not in the asking itself, but in understanding what you are asking and who is doing the asking. Joel discovered that most people are asking from a consciousness of lack, fear, and separation. They are asking something outside themselves to fix their problems. This is why their prayers feel empty and produce no real change. True asking, as Jesus taught it, is a recognition of what already exists in spiritual reality. You are not begging for something you do not have. You are opening your awareness to receive what has always been present in divine consciousness. This distinction changes everything about how prayer works and why it succeeds or fails. When you grasp this principle completely, your entire relationship with the divine transforms. You stop being a beggar and become a receiver of infinite good that flows naturally when consciousness is properly aligned. Joel Goldsmith taught that the kingdom of God is within you, not somewhere in the distant heavens. This means everything you could ever need or desire already exists in your own consciousness. The asking Jesus spoke of is actually an inner turning, a shift in awareness from the material sense of limitation to the spiritual sense of wholeness. Most people ask from the level of the problem. They focus on what is wrong, what is missing, what hurts. This keeps consciousness locked in the very frequency that created the problem in the first place. Joel showed that effective spiritual work begins by rising above the problem into the consciousness where the solution already exists. Imagine asking while already knowing the answer is yes, not hoping, not wishing, but knowing with absolute certainty. This is the consciousness of true asking. It is not petition, but recognition. It is not begging, but claiming what spiritually belongs to you as a child of the infinite. The moment you understand this shift, you stop praying for things to change and start recognizing the spiritual perfection that is already present. This is when miracles become natural and receiving becomes effortless. Joel discovered through years of spiritual practice that asking is actually a form of listening. When you ask correctly, you are not sending requests outward. You are becoming still enough to hear the answer that divine intelligence is already speaking. The answer precedes the question in spiritual reality. Think of it like tuning a radio. The music is already broadcasting on every frequency. When you ask, you are adjusting your inner dial to receive what is already being transmitted. Most people are asking on the wrong frequency, expecting to hear classical music while tuned to static. This is why Joel emphasized contemplative meditation over petitionary prayer. In the silence, when your human mind becomes quiet, the divine reality can impress itself upon your awareness. You begin to receive not through mental effort, but through spiritual receptivity. The asking becomes an opening rather than a demanding. Your consciousness is the receiving station for infinite intelligence. When it is clear, still, and aligned with spiritual truth, the answers flow naturally. Problems dissolve not because you force change, but because you perceive the reality that was always present beneath the illusion. The reason most asking fails is because people are asking from the separated self, the ego that believes it is cut off from God and must convince a reluctant deity to provide. Joel taught that this consciousness cannot receive because it is founded on the lie of separation. God is not separate from you, withholding good until you ask correctly enough. True asking recognizes your oneness with infinite source. You're not separate from the supply you seek. The intelligence, health, abundance, and love you desire are not outside you waiting to be granted. They are the very nature of the consciousness you are made of when you remember who you truly are. Jesus said the Father knows what you need before you ask. This means the divine is already providing, already answering, already supplying everything necessary for your wholeness. Your role is not to inform God of your problems, but to align your awareness with the divine provision that never stops flowing. When you ask from this consciousness of oneness, you're not asking for something to be created. You're accepting what already is. This is the secret that transforms prayer from struggle into grace, from effort into receiving, from begging into claiming your spiritual inheritance. Helen was a woman who had prayed for financial breakthrough for 3 years with no results. She attended every prayer meeting, repeated affirmations daily, and believed she was doing everything right. Yet her bank account remained empty and opportunities seemed to pass her by. She was exhausted from asking and ready to give up on spiritual principles entirely. When Helen encountered Joel Goldsmith's teachings, everything shifted. She learned she had been asking from lack consciousness, constantly affirming her need and poverty. Every prayer reinforced the very condition she wanted to escape. Joel taught her to stop asking for money and start recognizing the infinite substance that is the true nature of reality. For 2 months, Helen practiced contemplative meditation, not asking for anything but simply resting in the awareness of divine completeness. She stopped tracking her bank balance obsessively. She stopped panicking about bills. She started each day recognizing that infinite intelligence was already providing everything necessary for her well-being. The transformation was gradual, but undeniable. Within 3 months, Helen received an unexpected job offer with triple her previous salary. A forgotten investment matured with surprising returns. Opportunities appeared that had always been there, but she had been too anxious to notice. She learned that asking is not begging, but opening to receive. Marcus had suffered from chronic pain for 7 years. He had prayed desperately for healing, visited countless healers, and tried every spiritual technique he could find. Each time the pain returned, his faith diminished. He began to believe either God did not care, or that he was somehow unworthy of healing. Joel Goldsmith's principle changed Marcus's entire approach. He realized he had been asking God to fix a material body, which kept his consciousness locked in the belief that something was wrong. Joel taught that true healing happens when you rise above the material sense into spiritual reality where perfection is already established. Marcus stopped praying for his pain to go away. Instead, he spent time each day recognizing the spiritual body that knows no disease, age, or limitation. He did not deny the pain when it appeared, but he refused to give it power through constant attention. He practiced turning from the problem to the presence of divine wholeness within. Over 6 months, the pain episodes decreased in frequency and intensity. More importantly, Marcus's fear of the pain dissolved. He discovered an inner peace that remained stable regardless of physical sensations. A year later, the chronic condition had completely resolved. The healing came not from asking for relief, but from recognizing the spiritual perfection that was always his true nature. Victoria had been asking for the right relationship for over a decade. She had created vision boards, done affirmations, and prayed with intensity. Yet every relationship either never materialized or ended in disappointment. She felt cursed and wondered if she was meant to be alone forever. Her prayers felt like they were hitting a ceiling and bouncing back. When Victoria studied Joel's teachings on consciousness, she understood her mistake. She had been asking from loneliness and desperation, which could only attract more experiences of lack. Joel taught that you cannot receive from consciousness what is not already in consciousness. Her awareness was saturated with the belief that she was incomplete without a partner. Victoria began a different practice. Instead of asking for someone to complete her, she spent months recognizing her own spiritual wholeness. She stopped searching desperately and started living fully from her current completeness. She practiced feeling the love she sought, knowing that love is not something you get from another person, but something you are. Within 8 months of this shift, Victoria met Jonathan at a community event she attended simply for joy, not hunting for partners. The relationship unfolded naturally, built on 2 whole people choosing to share rather than 2 incomplete people needing to merge. She learned that asking is not about getting what you lack, but recognizing what you already are. Gregory was a businessman facing bankruptcy. His company was failing, creditors were demanding payment, and his family's security was threatened. He had prayed intensely for a miracle, for God to intervene and save his business. Each day without rescue deepened his panic and sense of abandonment. He felt his prayers were useless. Joel Goldsmith's teaching reached Gregory at his lowest point. He learned that his frantic prayers were actually reinforcing his crisis consciousness. Every desperate ask was an affirmation of disaster. Joel taught him to cease mental struggling and enter the silence where divine intelligence could guide him beyond human reasoning. Gregory practiced contemplative stillness twice daily for 3 months, not asking for solutions but opening to wisdom beyond his limited perspective. He stopped forcing outcomes and started listening for guidance. Gradually, clarity emerged. He saw business restructuring possibilities he had overlooked. He made decisions from peace rather than panic. The business did not save itself overnight. Some painful changes were necessary, but within a year, Gregory had restructured successfully and discovered a more sustainable business model. The transformation came not from asking God to preserve what was failing, but from receiving the wisdom that could create something better. He learned that divine provision often looks different than human expectation. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which healing journey resonated most with you. Joel Goldsmith taught a complementary practice he called resting in the Word. This technique works alongside proper asking to deepen your receptivity. When you have a question or need, instead of repeatedly asking about it, you select a spiritual truth that addresses the consciousness behind the problem. You rest in that truth like marinating in divine reality. For example, if you are asking about financial supply, you might rest in the word that God is infinite abundance, and you are the expression of that abundance. You do not repeat this mechanically like an affirmation. You sit with it, let it unfold in your awareness. Feel its truth resonating in your consciousness until it becomes real to you. This practice prevents the asking from becoming anxious repetition. Instead of bombarding heaven with requests, you ask once with clarity, then rest in the spiritual truth that addresses the situation. The resting is where the transformation happens. Your consciousness absorbs the truth like soil absorbing rain. Joel discovered that problems persist, not because God is slow to answer, but because consciousness remains unchanged. When you rest in spiritual truth daily, your consciousness gradually shifts from problem awareness to solution awareness. The outer circumstances then reorganize to match your transformed inner state. Another powerful technique Joel taught is the practice of impersonal prayer. Most asking is intensely personal, focused on me and my problems, my needs, my desires. This personal focus actually limits what can be received because it keeps consciousness small and self-centered. Impersonal prayer expands your awareness beyond personal concerns. In impersonal prayer, you recognize spiritual principles that are true for everyone everywhere. You do not ask for your healing, but recognize that healing is the nature of divine reality for all. You do not ask for your supply, but acknowledge that infinite abundance is the truth of existence itself, flowing to all who are open. This practice seems counterintuitive. How can asking for everyone help me specifically? Joel discovered that when you pray impersonally, you rise into universal consciousness where all good is already established. From that elevated awareness, your personal experience automatically reflects the universal truth you have recognized. Try this practice. When you have a need, instead of asking for yourself, spend time recognizing the spiritual truth behind the need as a universal principle. Acknowledge that divine intelligence governs all, supplies all, heals all. As you rest in this impersonal truth, you will find your personal situation transforming without the struggle of focused personal asking. Joel also taught the practice of releasing mental pictures. When you ask, your human mind immediately creates pictures of how the answer should look, when it should arrive, and what form it should take. These mental pictures become barriers that prevent you from receiving what divine intelligence is actually providing, which is often far beyond what your limited mind could imagine. True asking includes releasing your attachment to specific outcomes. You present your need or question to divine consciousness, then step back and remain open to how the answer appears. The universe has infinite ways to provide what you need, but if you are demanding one specific path, you close yourself to all other possibilities. This does not mean you have no preferences or desires. It means you hold your preferences lightly, willing to receive something better than you could conceive. Joel often said that divine supply comes in forms we do not expect through channels we did not anticipate. Your mental pictures limit the infinite to your finite imagination. Practice asking with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. State your need or question clearly, then add silently, "This or something better for the highest good." Release your grip on how it must happen. Trust that intelligence greater than your human reasoning is already arranging the perfect provision. The final complementary technique is what Joel called living by grace. This means shifting from asking God to do things to recognizing that God is already being all, doing all, and providing all. You stop trying to get God to act and start acknowledging the divine action that never ceases. This is the difference between effortful asking and receptive allowing. Living by grace means you go through your day aware that infinite intelligence is governing every situation. You do not have to make everything happen through your human effort. You do your part with wisdom and diligence, but you trust that there is a divine component working through and beyond your efforts to produce results you could not achieve alone. When challenges arise, instead of asking God to fix them, you pause and recognize that divine intelligence is already present in this situation, with wisdom beyond your understanding. You ask not for intervention, but for the awareness to perceive the spiritual reality that already contains the solution. This subtle shift transforms struggle into cooperation with grace. Joel lived this way consistently. He did not frantically ask for guidance before every decision. He lived in a consciousness of oneness with divine intelligence, trusting that he would know what to do when action was required. This is the ultimate fruit of understanding true asking. You rest in continuous communion rather than periodic petition. One of the most common challenges people face when learning this approach to asking is impatience. You practice for a few days or weeks, and when dramatic results do not appear immediately, you conclude the teaching does not work and return to old patterns. This is where most people abandon the practice just before the consciousness shift would have manifested visible results. Joel consistently taught that consciousness transformation takes time. You are not just trying a new technique. You are undoing years or decades of conditioned thinking, fear patterns, and belief in separation. The old consciousness does not dissolve overnight. It requires patient, persistent practice to establish a new foundation of awareness. The key is consistency, without anxiety about timing. Practice your contemplative meditation daily, not because you must see results today, but because you are cultivating spiritual awareness as a way of life. Some people experience rapid transformation. Others need months of practice before visible changes occur. Neither timeline reflects your worthiness or the truth of the principle. Trust the process, even when physical evidence lags behind your practice. The consciousness shift is happening in the invisible realm first. Continue your daily practice of resting in spiritual truth, releasing mental pictures, and recognizing divine presence. The outer results will appear when the inner foundation is sufficiently established. Another significant challenge is the tendency to return to old patterns during crisis. You practice beautifully when life is calm, but the moment serious trouble hits, panic takes over, and you forget everything you learned. You revert to desperate begging, anxious mental struggling, and frantic human effort. This is completely normal and does not mean you have failed. Joel himself experienced this in his early years of practice. During intense difficulty, the temptation to abandon spiritual principles and resort to human panic is almost overwhelming. The key is not to judge yourself harshly when this happens, but to gently return to the practice as soon as you recognize what occurred. Build your spiritual consciousness during peaceful times so it becomes strong enough to sustain you during storms. This is why daily practice matters even when you have no pressing needs. You are establishing an inner foundation that will hold steady when external circumstances become turbulent. The practice during easy times prepares you for difficult times. When you catch yourself reverting to panic and desperate asking, simply pause. Take a breath. Remind yourself of what you know. Return to the silence. Recognize divine presence even in the midst of the crisis. Each time you do this, you strengthen your ability to maintain spiritual consciousness regardless of external conditions. A third challenge is dealing with doubt when you see others experiencing rapid results while your progress seems slower. Comparison becomes a thief of faith. You wonder if something is wrong with you, if you are practicing incorrectly, or if the teaching works for everyone except you. This doubt can undermine your practice completely. Joel addressed this directly in his writings. Every consciousness is unique, carrying different layers of conditioning, different belief patterns, and different levels of spiritual readiness. Some people are prepared by life circumstances to receive truth quickly. Others need more time to dissolve the barriers their experience has created. Neither is better or worse. Your spiritual journey is yours alone. Comparing your progress to another person's experience is meaningless because you are not working with the same consciousness. What matters is whether you are moving forward from where you were, not whether you are matching someone else's pace. Growth is growth regardless of speed. Focus on your own unfolding. Celebrate the small shifts in your awareness, the moments of peace that last longer, the problems that resolve more easily. These are evidence that consciousness is transforming. Trust your unique timing and refuse to let comparison steal your confidence in the process. The fourth major challenge is maintaining practice when results appear to contradict spiritual truth. You practice recognizing health consciousness, and the symptoms worsen. You recognize abundance and lose your job. The human mind interprets this as evidence that spiritual principles do not work. This is a critical point where many abandon the practice. Joel taught that appearances often intensify before they dissolve. This is not because spiritual practice makes things worse, but because your increased awareness sees more clearly what was always there. Additionally, sometimes what appears as worsening is actually a necessary reorganization that precedes breakthrough. The caterpillar must dissolve before becoming a butterfly. This is where faith in spiritual reality over material appearance becomes essential. You must decide whether consciousness or conditions are primary. If consciousness is truly creative, then changing consciousness must eventually change conditions, even when appearances temporarily suggest otherwise. Hold steady through the contradictory evidence. Joel's own healing work involved many cases where symptoms initially intensified during spiritual treatment before complete healing occurred. He learned not to judge by appearances but to remain faithful to spiritual truth, regardless of what the senses reported. This steadfastness is what allows transformation to complete itself. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Sophia was an advanced spiritual student who understood Joel's teachings intellectually, but struggled to live them during ordinary daily life. She could reach beautiful states of consciousness during meditation, but returned to fear and struggle the moment she opened her eyes. She asked how to bridge the gap between meditation and daily living. Joel's answer was to practice moment-by-moment awareness. Do not separate your spiritual practice from your daily activities. As you go through routine tasks, washing dishes, driving, working, practice recognizing divine presence in each moment. Ask not just during meditation, but continuously throughout your day by maintaining awareness of spiritual reality. Sophia began practicing what Joel called practicing the presence. Before each activity, she would pause briefly to recognize that divine intelligence was present and active. She stopped dividing her life into sacred meditation time and secular activity time. Everything became spiritual practice. Every moment was an opportunity to ask and receive by being aware. Over many months, the gap between meditation and life gradually closed. Sophia found herself naturally responding from spiritual consciousness during challenges without having to stop and meditate first. The consciousness she touched in silence became her living awareness. This is the advanced stage where asking becomes your natural state of being. Benjamin faced an advanced challenge: how to practice when surrounded by people who do not understand or support spiritual principles. His family mocked his meditation practice. His colleagues considered his beliefs naive. He felt isolated and wondered if he could maintain his practice in an unsupportive environment. Joel taught that spiritual consciousness does not require external validation or support. Your practice is between you and divine reality, not between you and the opinions of others. In fact, maintaining your awareness despite opposition strengthens your consciousness far more than practicing in a supportive bubble. Benjamin learned to practice silently without announcing his beliefs to everyone. He maintained his morning meditation and inner awareness throughout the day without needing others to understand or approve. He discovered that spiritual consciousness does not need to be defended or explained. It simply needs to be lived. Gradually, Benjamin's consistent practice produced visible fruit in his life. His peace during stress, his wisdom in decisions, and his ability to remain centered when others panicked spoke louder than any words. Some family members began asking questions. His example became more effective than any argument could have been. Claire encountered an advanced dilemma. She had been practicing Joel's principles successfully for years when suddenly she experienced a major setback that seemed to contradict everything she had learned. A serious illness appeared despite her consistent spiritual practice. She felt betrayed by principles she had trusted completely. Joel addressed this situation in his advanced teachings. Spiritual practice does not create a magical shield against all human experience. Even spiritually aware people can face challenges that appear to contradict their level of consciousness. The difference is not in avoiding all problems, but in how you move through them. Claire returned to the basics. Instead of asking why this happened to her after faithful practice, she asked how to remain spiritually aware within this situation. She did not pretend the illness was not real. She sought medical help when appropriate, but she refused to let the condition define her identity or destroy her awareness of spiritual wholeness. Through months of patient practice, Claire experienced healing, but more importantly, she discovered a deeper level of consciousness. She learned that spiritual maturity is not about never facing challenges, but about maintaining your awareness of divine presence regardless of circumstances. The illness became her teacher rather than her enemy. Edward was a healer who had helped many people through Joel's principles but struggled when asked to help his own seriously ill child. All the consciousness techniques he had used successfully with others seemed powerless when his beloved daughter was suffering. His desperation to fix the situation blocked his ability to rest in spiritual truth. Joel taught that personal attachment is often the greatest barrier to effective spiritual work. When you are emotionally desperate for a specific outcome, you cannot rest in the openness that allows divine intelligence to work. Edward needed to practice surrendering his daughter into divine care rather than trying to force healing through anxious spiritual effort. This was the hardest practice Edward ever faced. He had to release his grip on demanding that his daughter be healed exactly as he envisioned. He practiced recognizing her spiritual perfection while simultaneously being present to her human experience without denial. He learned to trust divine intelligence more than his own desperate efforts. The daughter's healing unfolded gradually over many months, not in the dramatic way Edward had demanded, but in the perfect way that divine wisdom provided. Edward learned that true asking includes surrendering your loved ones into care greater than your human love, trusting that infinite intelligence loves them even more perfectly than you do. When you truly understand ask, and you shall receive as Jesus and Joel Goldsmith taught it, your entire relationship with life transforms. You stop being a beggar approaching a reluctant deity and become a conscious receiver of infinite good that flows continuously from the source of all being. Prayer becomes communion rather than petition. You discover that asking is not about getting God to change circumstances, but about aligning consciousness with spiritual reality, where all wholeness already exists. Problems do not require divine intervention to fix them. They require spiritual awareness to recognize the perfection that was always present beneath the illusion of limitation. Your daily life becomes a practice of receptivity. You wake each morning aware that divine intelligence is already providing everything necessary for this day. You move through challenges not by frantically asking for rescue, but by recognizing the presence and power already available in every situation. Fear loses its grip because you know you are never separate from infinite source. This does not mean you never face difficulties or experience challenges. It means you face them from a transformed consciousness that knows how to receive divine wisdom, strength, and provision in the midst of any circumstance. You become like a tree planted by streams of water, drawing constantly from a source that never runs dry. The ultimate transformation is discovering that you yourself are the answer to your asking. Not your human personality or limited ego, but the divine consciousness that is your true nature. When Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you, he meant that everything you seek outside yourself is actually the nature of your own being when recognized spiritually. You stop searching for God to give you love when you realize you are made of love itself. You stop asking for abundance when you recognize that infinite substance is the very consciousness you exist within. You stop begging for healing when you understand that spiritual wholeness is your permanent reality regardless of temporary physical appearances. This is what Joel called the mystical experience, the direct awareness that you and the Father are one, not separate beings negotiating terms, but one consciousness expressing itself. From this awareness, asking becomes recognition, receiving becomes natural, Miracles become the normal experience of consciousness aligned with its true nature. You do not reach this awareness through more effort or more intense asking. You reach it through surrendering the belief in separation, releasing the struggle to become what you already are, and resting in the silence where truth reveals itself. This is the pearl of great price that makes all other treasures worthwhile. Living from this transformed consciousness means you approach each day differently. You do not wake up planning how to make things happen through human effort alone. You wake aware that divine intelligence is already at work in your life, guiding, providing, and unfolding good that you could not orchestrate through personal planning. You make decisions from peace rather than anxiety because you trust that you are not alone in navigating life's choices. You ask for guidance not by begging for signs, but by becoming still enough to hear the wisdom that is always speaking. You recognize answers in unexpected moments, through unlikely sources, in ways your human mind would never have anticipated. You relate to others differently. Instead of manipulating or controlling to get your needs met, you trust that divine intelligence is providing through countless channels, many of which you cannot see or predict. You give freely because you know supply flows from infinite source, not from other people's limited resources. Challenges still arise, but you meet them from a foundation of inner security rather than panic. You know that every problem contains its own solution when viewed from spiritual consciousness. You ask not for problems to disappear, but for the awareness to perceive the spiritual reality that transcends every material limitation. The teaching Jesus gave and Joel.goldsmith clarified transforms everything when truly understood. Ask and you shall receive is not a formula for getting what your human personality wants. It is an invitation to recognize your oneness with infinite intelligence and receive the continuous flow of good that is always available to spiritual awareness. Your practice now is not to perfect your asking technique, but to deepen your awareness of the presence that is closer to you than your own breath. You do not need to ask better. You need to receive what has already been given, to recognize what is already present, to accept what has always been yours in spiritual reality. This journey does not end. It deepens infinitely. Each day brings new opportunities to choose spiritual awareness over material sense, to rest in presence rather than struggle in absence, to receive from fullness rather than beg from lack. You are becoming the expression of infinite consciousness that you were always created to be. Joel.goldsmith spent his life sharing this transformative truth. Now it is yours. Practice it daily. Live it consistently. Watch your entire experience of reality transform as your consciousness awakens to the infinite good that asks only to be recognized and received. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel.goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.